What's going on, everybody? This is not exactly a podcast, but I know I told you guys that I wasn't going to do one because I'm on break, I'm on some spring break, which I am. That's true. As you can see, not the studio. This is my house. This is literally, I'm literally in my kitchen. This is what we did over the winter break when I didn't have access to the studio. But so much stuff going around with all these quarterbacks in the NFL, and so many are available. So I thought I'm going to do a little short segment on where I think they're going to go, who's available, not only via free agency, if anyone's available for trade, even the top guys in the draft. I don't have too much draft stuff, but just like the top few quarterbacks in the draft where I think they'll end up going. So let's cut right to it. I broke down all the quarterbacks. I have a few tiers of quarterbacks who are available. First, let's talk about the guys I would say above average starter. They're very good starters. You probably won't win the Super Bowl with them, but they get you 10, 11 wins, win you a playoff game. Not further than that, but having 10, 11 wins and winning a playoff game is a lot better than a lot of our teams can say every single year. Let's start with the pretty obvious one, I think, although he's technically not a free agent, Aaron Rodgers. Aaron Rodgers, obviously, that's going to be a trade, but obviously he's very complicated, but I don't think he's an elite quarterback anymore. I wouldn't put him in like the category, with Mahomes and Burrow and Allen or anything. But I do think he's still a good quarterback. I think if he has the right pieces around him, you can win 10, 11 games with him. He's never been great in the playoffs. Does have a Super Bowl ring, but he's never been great in the postseason. But I think if you give him the right pieces, he could probably win a playoff game much further. Like, I don't even think he gets to a conference championship game anymore, but he could probably win a playoff game. He could probably win a playoff game. So, also in the category, I think it's Kirk Cousins. He's in that category. He's a guy. I mean, look at his numbers this year. He threw for, I think, like around 4,500 yards. He had 29 touchdowns against 14 interceptions. Vikings had 13 wins, but lose in the first round to the Giants. So Kirk's a guy who he's not a bad quarterback by any means. You got some guys who think, oh, he's underrated. He's actually really good. He's going to be a top 10 guy in the league. Some guys think he's overrated. They think he's terrible. The product he has around them, he's trash. I think he's probably right. He's a guy who he's a good quarterback, not a great quarterback. He's a good quarterback. If he has weapons around him, can do a lot of good things, can win you 10, 11 plus games, get you to the playoffs, might win a playoff game, but not further. He's a game manager. You look here. He had some nice pieces this year. Obviously, he had Justin Jefferson, our lead receiver. Adam Thielen was still producing. Even KJ Osborne was producing a little bit. Obviously, had Dalvin Cook behind him. He's a very good offensive with Kevin Stefanski as the head coach there. And you saw what he was able to do. I don't think he's going to be made available. I think Minnesota's going to stick with him. He's got another year on his deal. He usually sounds like 1 year extensions worth like $30-something million. So I don't think he's going to be available. But if he were to be available, he would probably be based off guys that are available, the second or third best quarterback available, probably. But I just don't think he's going to be available. I think Minnesota is going to stick with him. I could see them, at least what I would do. I would probably I would keep him, and I would draft somebody. Even if I know their first rounder, because they were to play isn't too high. It'll be probably, I'll say probably it's going to be barely in the top 25. So you're not going to get Bryce Young, obviously. You're obviously not getting CJ Stroud. You're probably only going to get low level for Anthony Richardson, but maybe could you get Hendon Hooker, a guy like that? You can always move up, but Minnesota also has to fix. I think they got to fix their defense, and even maybe the offensive line to an extent. And they don't have a ton of cap, so they may have to move some things around. Could Adam Thielen be a guy that they let go? I'm not sure what they're going to do. They already let go of Eric Kendricks. Their defense already needs a lot of work. Now that's another guy you got to replace because they don't have the money really to do all this. So they're letting guys go to open up as much money as they can. My guess is they'll probably look to restructure some contracts. So they might. So if a team that on paper right now is probably still the best team in the NFC North. The Bears suck. Packers obviously are still in limbo. Lions are improving. You could argue that they could win it, but they need to make the right move. Excuse me, they need to make the right move. If they do, they could absolutely win that division. As of now, the Vikings, I would think, are probably the best team in that division. Are they going to win more than one playoff game? I highly doubt it, but they are still the best team in that division. So they supposed to preparing for the future since you only have the one first rounder. They have 2 first rounders. You have the one first rounder. It's they were at 13 wins or in the playoffs, so pick won't be that high. They should probably look to get a nice piece on defense, or maybe on the offensive line to help them win this year. Maybe one last try at the playoff run, which they have not been able to get out of Kirk Cousins and this Minnesota Vikings team, but they thought they were going to get, because you go to the NFC Championship in 2017 with Case Keenum, you're like, oh, this team is fantastic. If we get a better quarterback in there, we could probably be a Super Bowl contender. And they thought they got their guy with Kirk Cousins, but that hasn't quite worked out that way, as they have won maybe 1 or 2 playoff games since he's been there. But he's in that category, but I don't think he'll be available. I think they're going to stick with him. Now to the next year, I'll say your average starting quarterbacks. Guys, if you were a solid starter, you give them they're in the right system. They can win you 9, 10 games, get you to the playoff, but might not go much further. A couple of them are already off the board. Geno Smith is already off the board. Seattle re-signed him 3 years, $105 million, which I think is a fine contract. I have no problem with that. He had a really nice year this year. He threw 4,200 yards and he threw 30 touchdowns. He was a Pro Bowler. Great story. Of course, the guy who was a second-round pick by the Jets back in 2013 was horrible, was benched after 2 brutal years. Then he bounced around the league as a backup from the Jets. He was with the Giants. He was with the Chargers. Even he was a backup at Seattle. Got a second chance to start this year after Seattle brought in. They traded Russell Wilson to Denver, and they didn't bring anybody else. The only other guy they really brought in was Drew Lock, who they get back in the Russell Wilson trade. He obviously has proven that he's not a starting caliber quarterback. They had those two guys compete for the job, and Zoom ended up winning the job. People were like, "Oh my God, Geno's terrible. How's he the star? They're going to go 5-12. They suck. They're horrible. They're going to be terrible this year." And then Geno ended up having an incredible year. He had that famous quote in week 1, when the reporter asked him, do you feel teams wrote you off? He goes, "They wrote me off. They wrote me off. I didn't write back." That's one of my favorite quotes of all time. I might have to start using that one in real life. That's a great quote, and he was always very humble. I love the way he carried himself. It's a great story. And Seattle, they were in the playoffs. So kudos to Geno Smith. Obviously, with my Jets, tough time, but certainly learned from his experiences. And he's now, you could argue, a top 10 quarterback in the league heading into the season. We also had Daniel Jones was re-signed by the Giants. He got 4 years, $160 million. I think they overpaid Daniel Jones. That didn't make a lot of sense to me. His first 3 years, he was terrible. I mean, his rookie year, he was okay. He did throw 20 touchdowns. As a rookie, he didn't have very good circumstances with, Pat Shurmur as his head coach, and look what he had around him wasn't fantastic. We thought he might sit for most of the year, and all of a sudden week 3 rolls around and they're like, "Oh, he's a star. We're benching Eli Manning." Just, where we did it, you could argue was a little bit odd. He also had 11 lost fumbles, plus the 12 picks. That's 23 turnovers. That's a big number. And then the next 2 years, he was horrible to the point where we were considering, all right, yes, this year, you finally got a real coach in there. After his first year, you had Pat Shermer, then you had Joe Judge, who was also terrible. Now you bring in a real head coach, and Brian Gable, who seemed to have an actual competent staff around them. You bring in what appears to be a competent GM in Joe Schoen. So, you try, adding some pieces. You add a piece or two to your offensive line. You add you sign Mark Lewinsky. Last year, you signed John Feliciano. You draft Evan Neal with one of your first-round picks. You kind of retool the defense. You draft Kayvon Thibodeau in the first round. They were considering cutting Blake Martinez. You decided to keep him. You gave a bigger role to some of the young guys have some bigger roles. Like a guy like Julian Love really got to shine this year. Now he's looking like he's going to get a nice contract in free agency, whether it's from a Giant or whether it's from somebody else. So you kind of let some of these guys shine, which helped. And despite him not having any receivers, because Kenny Galladay was useless. He was completely useless. He was injured at times. When he was healthy, he looked like he was injured. He might have had more drops than catches this year. I don't know how. Didn't even know that was possible. And of course, they just cut him. You had Sterling Shepard got hurt. He tore his Achilles very early on in the season. Kadarius Toney was hurt, and he traded him to the Chiefs. I think he never really fit well over there. First, he goes to the Chiefs and looked like freaking looks like freaking Cooper Kupp over there. And Wanda Robinson was a guy you drafted who was stepping up, and then he gets hurt. So you're working with Darius Slayton, who's a number 4 receiver, but he's certainly not number 1. You had Isaiah Hodgins, who I had never heard of. Murphy James, who I had heard of, but I was like, why is he being targeted 8 times a game? He should be your 5th receiver. And their tight end was Daniel Bellinger, who was some 6th-round rookie who probably shouldn't even be in the NFL. And of course, you had Saquon Barkley behind you, who of course had a fantastic year. But he had no receiver. Then he actually he played better. He played better. O-line was a little bit better, and it wasn't great. It had a bunch of, when healthy, their O-line was pretty good. It was much better when they were healthy. Problem is, they had a bunch of injuries on the offensive line, which, at times, especially when they played some really good front seven, like for the Eagles, Jones got beat up a little bit. Overall, he was better, but the guy threw 15 touchdowns yards, one less than Russell Wilson, who was already a bottom 5 quarterback in the NFL this year with Denver. He's never thrown more than 20 touchdowns in the season. No, it's not all his fault. Far from it. At the end of the day, the guy's got 1 playoff win for you. He was the 6th pick in the draft. It wasn't like he was a 2nd-round pick. He was the 6th pick in the draft. In 4 years since that, he's got 1 playoff win, 1 playoff appearance. He has not thrown more than 20 touchdowns in a single season. He's getting this contract coming off a year where he only threw 15 touchdowns in a season. And also, because not only he's not worth $40 million a year, he's not. Yes, Geno Smith and Daniel Jones both only really have 1 good season under their belts. And Geno gets 35 a year and Jones gets 40. The years when you compare them like that, I get why Jones got the extra year because Geno's 32, Jones is 25, 26. So that I see where you're coming from there. But I just don't understand how he's worth $40 million. Like I say, you look, Geno Smith threw 4,200 yards and 30 touchdowns. He gets 35 a year, and Jones threw 3,500 yards and 15 touchdowns. And he had what he did on the ground, and he gets $40 million a year. I don't understand. And also, yes, Geno Smith only had 1 good year, in the previous 9 years he was a backup. But Jones was a replacement level player his first 3 years as well. Not all his fault. He didn't have a ton of help. But at the end of the day, he was not good his first 3 years. He has one wasn't even great year. He had 1 somewhat good year, especially considering the circumstances, I guess. And he gave him $40 million a year. In his first year, he's making over $50 million. He's going to make more than Patrick Mahomes in the first year of his contract. And Mahomes is arguably the best quarterback in football. We don't even know if Daniel Jones is good. We think he is after last year, but we don't know for sure. Like, I just don't understand. Like last year, you bring in Schoen, a GM who did not draft him. You have a head coach in Dable going into his second year who was not in the organization when they drafted him. And you just you paid him like he proved he's your franchise quarterback. I don't understand what he proved last year. Yes, did he earn another year on a tag? Yes, he did. To get that team to the playoffs, help get the team to the playoffs before he was working with is a very good accomplishment. And I think he deserves another season. So I'm fine if you tag him for $33 million and having him play on the tag. Maybe from there you give him a 2 or 3 year deal. Maybe you give him $30 million a year. Maybe 2 for 60, 3 for 90. Maybe I would have tagged him to you. I would have tagged them and said, you're playing on the tag. We'll get you some weapons, go ball out, and next year we'll talk about a long-term deal. If you don't want to play on the tag, I ain't giving you 40, I'm giving you $40 million. From there, I would just trade them. A lot of quarterback needing teams, someone will give you something. You might even get a first-round pick for him. If not, you would at least get a couple of nice mid-round, maybe a 2 and a 4. Maybe, a 2, 4, and a 3, maybe a 2 and a 4 and a 3 next year or something like that. Now that's a couple extra nice picks that you can use to draft some guys to help you, or maybe package you to move up and get somebody, or package you to get another really nice player. Maybe DeAndre Hopkins, who's looking like he's going to get traded by Arizona. Could the Giants be interested in him? Wide receiver is probably their number one concern right now. And then from there you can go out and sign. I think if you add the right pieces with Jimmy Garoppolo, I think this team makes the playoffs again. I don't see why not. Yes, they're in a competitive division. The Eagles are going to lose a couple pieces, but they should still be an 11-12 team probably. You got the Dallas. I mean, they're not going to win a playoff game, Dallas, but they'll probably win at least 10, 11 games. Well, even the Commanders. I mean, right now they're probably again a 7-8 win team. But if they make the right moves and if Sam Howell plays well next year, they could be in the playoff. They could sneak in the playoffs. So yes, they're in a competitive division, but I think if you add another piece on the offensive line, some better weapons, I don't see why this team can't win 9, 10 games and go to the playoffs again next year. With Dable running the show, they're pretty much their entire coaching staff is back. They kept Mike Kafka, their offensive coordinator. They kept the coordinator, Del Martindale. Both got head coach interviews, especially Kafka. Both didn't end up getting the job, so they're both back. Obviously, Joe Schoen's still there. I don't see why they can go back to the playoffs. I mean, last year they had 9 wins and were the 6th seed, and all they can't do that again. Or 9 or 10. 9 wins, 10 wins, whatever it was. Well, they couldn't go back. Also, after you give Jones $40 million a year and you tag Saquon, and the tag for running back this year is a touch over, just a smidge over $10 million, you have $26 million left, which is still a somewhat good amount. But also, they probably need a couple receivers. They need a true number 1 and probably one more guy. They need another linebacker. They need to re-sign Joey Love, their free safety. They probably need one more guy on the offensive line, especially with your center, Feliciano, hits the free agent market. Maybe one more guard across from Lewinsky. I don't know if $26 million is enough. That being said, if you were to lock up Saquon, is Saquon getting that much more than $10 million a year on a 4-year deal, which we probably get? I don't think any running back touches 15, 16 million a year. Actually, Zeke got 15 million, and we saw what happened to him. So maybe instead of getting 10, maybe he gets 13. I don't think he goes above that. Yes, he was phenomenal last year. He's one of the league's best running backs. Obviously, we saw what he did as a rookie. But in between his rookie year and past year, the previous 3 years, he was injured a lot. Even when he was healthy, he was not quite the same guy. Probably because he was battling all these injuries throughout the whole season. So he gets so even if you pay him $2 or $3 million more this year, but if you tag Jones for 30, 32, 33 million, you would have so much more cap space. I think Jones is making like $52 million. So you'd probably save like $15 or $17 million. That you probably have north of $40 million in cap space. And now with that, you can go out and pretty much get any receiver you want, and there's not too many available via free agency. But Jacoby Myers is probably might get north of 15 million. That's probably too much for him. But if you want to, if not, you could. I mean, you could, afford to take on a salary like a guy like DeAndre Hopkins, or if the Bengals move T. Higgins, I don't think they will, based on what their GM just said, one of their executives just said, or like a Brandon Ayuk or a guy like that. I know something might be available in Denver, and you can still sign a linebacker, a really good linebacker. You can re-sign Julian Love. You can add a piece on the offensive line with $40 million. 26 million, you might get a receiver you need, which is the big thing. I understand that, and you might be able to squeeze in a decent linebacker, but can you still re-sign Julian Love and improve the offensive line? I don't know if you can now. So you should have signed Barkley. I mean, he clearly wants to be with the Giants, and he would have deserved, well, I think giving him $12 million a year is fine. It's a risk because of his injuries, but you cannot let Saquon leave after what he did last year. You just cannot. And you tag Jones, you would have had so much more cap space. Like, I don't understand why they did it. That made no sense. But moving on to going to Derek Carr is also not having in that same tier. He gets 4 years, $150 million from the Saints. Interesting. It appeared, he met with the Jet. Well, the whole thing was the Saints were trying to trade for him. I believe they have a trade in place, but Carr was like, wait, I have two options. I could either waive on my no trade clause, and now they can turn me anywhere they want. How they can send me to freaking like the Atlanta Falcons who got no talent on that roster, and now I won't get I won't get paid as much as if I was a free agent. Or I cannot waive my no trade clause, force them to cut me. I can go wherever I want and charge as much money as I want. It's like, oh well, I was like, well, no, I'm not getting. You ain't trading me a Science. I might sign there, but you ain't trading me there. I'm gonna choose. I ain't waiving that clause, and I don't blame them. So the Raiders like, I guess we'll cut you. They still save a ton of money. It's the cap. They obviously don't want him back. I'm like, okay, bye, I guess. And then he signs 4 years, $150 million with the Saints, 37.5. I think it's a little bit too much for Carr. That being said, the Saints now, I think, are the best team in that division. We don't know what's going to happen with the other teams, Tampa, Carolina, and Atlanta. There's still a whole set of free agency to go. But as of right now, the Saints should win 9 to 10 games, which will be enough for them to win that division. Tampa has a quarterback in Kyle Trask we've never seen the field before in 2 years, and they need help on the offensive line. Their secondary is a lot of free agents. Carolina needs a quarterback and has some other holes. Atlanta has holes all throughout the roster. You got the Saints who do have some holes still, maybe on the offensive line. Cam Jordan, I'm not sure how much longer Cam Jordan can play at a high level. He had a slight regression last year. I don't like Dan Allen as a head coach. That being said, Derek Carr was his quarterback when he first went to the Raiders as head coach. So there's a connection there. So maybe those two can work together. We'll see. So I still like to hurt the Saints, but even if they got 9-8 at this point, that probably wins the division. I mean, the Bucs won at 8-9 last year, and they're probably even worse. They were, Atlanta won 7 games, and they're not any better. Carolina won, I think, 7 or 8 games. They don't look any better than they were last year. They have better coach than Frank Reich, but the actual players, the overall talent isn't any better. They obviously haven't made any moves yet. Brady hasn't started yet, obviously. So even if you're in 8, so I don't see why if New Orleans wins 9 games, they don't win the division, unless if Tampa or one of these teams does something big, okay, but that hasn't happened yet, obviously. So I get why they overpaid him. That made a little more sense than at least Carr for 9 years was a pretty consistent, decent starter. I mean, no playoff wins in 9 years, being average for 9 years. That's only saying so much. But Saints got their guy, Derek Carr. So those are the guys that are off the board. Now let's talk about some other average stars that are there. Jimmy Garoppolo is a big one. So Jimmy Garoppolo, he's not this otherworldly quarterback. He definitely needs to have pieces around him. He's a guy where I hear some people like, oh, he's underrated. The guy's a winner. Look at his regular season record. He was in the Super Bowl. Then he was in the conference championship. We don't think, oh, he's trash. If he hasn't a piece around him, he would be a backup. I think he's like in the middle. I think if you put pieces around it, if you give him a good offensive line and some nice pieces around him, he can be a nice solid starter for you. And he can take you to the playoffs. If you have enough firepower, he might be able to help get you to. He might be able to win a couple playoff games for you. So he's an average starter. He's on the market. I don't see him going back to the Niners. If I'm the Niners, if Purdy's healthy, I think you start him. And you gave up two first round future first to get Trey Lance. You're not going to, obviously he was a starter last year, and then he got hurt, which was why they went back to Jimmy G. And Jimmy G got hurt. They're like, all right, I guess Brock Purdy's the next guy up, and he played well. He played pretty well to the point where you could argue if he had stayed healthy, they would have beaten the Eagles. I think that's fair to say. And they might have won the Super Bowl if they were against the Chiefs. I don't know if the Chiefs defense would have been able to stop their offense. If they gave up 35 to the Eagles, Niners may have dropped 40 plus on them. And they may have had a little bit slightly easier time stopping the Chiefs defense, at least limiting their offense rather. But anyway, back Jimmy Garoppolo. I think he's a decent starter. And he's definitely in that category. Another guy that's there, Ryan Tannehill. If he's available, he's got another year left on his deal. Of course, he's coming off of the year where he got hurt last year. Their new GM, Ron Carfin, came out and said, yeah, he is a Titan right now, and he will be a Titan. So based on what he's saying, it appears he's going to stay with the Titans. So I don't think he's available. But if he were to be available, that's a guy who, if you give him some decent pieces, can win you 9, maybe 10 games. And that's probably as far as you go. I'm not sure if he wins a playoff game. He has not been good in the playoffs, but he can get you to the playoffs. He can be a good bridge quarterback. All right, now to the next tier. This next tier of quarterbacks is a couple of names I have who are guys who aren't great starting quarterbacks per se, but they're good. They're really good backups and are good fill-in starters. When starter goes down, they have to start a bunch of games, even if it's like the majority of the season. In the right system, might be able to squeeze 9 wins in and maybe just slide you into the postseason. First name is Gardner Minshew. He's a guy when he was the full-time starter in Jacksonville, like the second time. The first year he filled in for Foles, and the game was starting of the year after. He wasn't that good. He was actually benched a couple of times. He had some injuries too, but he was also benched a couple of times. I think for Mike Glennon. But as a fill-in starter, his rookie year in Jacksonville, he played very well. Even the last 2 years, filling in for Jalen Hurts once in a while when Hurts got nicked up, and then he sat out the one game when he was resting because the Eagles didn't play for stars in the season finale against the Giants. He was pretty good. He's a guy, if he has good pieces around him, he can honestly be probably a serviceable starter. I think as a fill-in starter, he's one of the best fill-in starter options. Obviously, a fill-in starter, they're only starting if a guy goes down or he's just so incompetent that the point you're like, all right, just I'll throw anybody else in there, like Zach Wilson. And then Robert Sala was like, just Mike White, just go in there. Just somebody else, something like that. I do think there is some value in that. You need guys like that. If you have a quarterback, let's say if the Commanders roll with Tim Howell, you don't know what you're getting from him. Minshew on that team could be a guy that you would want. Another guy on my list is Taylor Heineke. He was the guy. I don't want him as a full-time starter. 2 years ago when he started from he was named a starter in week 2 when Fitzpatrick hurt his shoulder. Fitzpatrick's last year. He wasn't that great. Commanders didn't underperform a year. Only had, I think, 7 wins. missed the playoffs, and that year we felt they might win that division that year. But last year, they started to win. He wasn't playing. First of all, he wasn't playing well. There were people clamoring for Ron Rivera to pivot to Heineke. Then he gets hurt, so they were forced to. Heineke, he wasn't playing fantastic, but they were winning. So when Wentz came back, they kept him in. And honestly, I don't agree with Ron Rivera going back to Wentz once Wentz was healthy. I actually thought they may have gone into the postseason if they had not went back to Heineke late in the season last year. So he's a guy, possibly in the right system with the right pieces around him, could be a serviceable starter. But again, I think he fits better as like a fill-in. Bring him. He should go somewhere where the starting quarterback is on shaky ground. If something happens, if they struggle to the point where they're not the best option to win football games for the team, or he gets hurt, if Heineke has to be thrown in there, he can, hold down the fort and possibly, if he has the right pieces around him, sneak into the postseason. Another guy in that category is Jacoby Brissett. I don't think Brissett is a starting caliber quarterback, but you saw, this past year, he had to be the starter for the first 11 games because Deshaun Watson was suspended. For Cleveland, he was okay. That's kind of what you're getting out of him. He's a very good, he's a good leader. I think all three guys are leaders. I think Gardner Minshew is a real good dude, and I think he's a pretty good leader. Taylor Heineke, I think he's a very good leader. He's a really good story. He was in the XFL. He was in and out of the league on different practice squads, and he finally got a shot. And, he almost beat Tom Brady in the playoffs a couple of years ago. Last year was almost in the postseason. If he wasn't benched, he might have been in the postseason. So that's a whole other conversation. So I think Brissett is a good leader. He really doesn't have a good arm. His deep ball is not very good, but but the short throws he's pretty good with. He's very, very accurate. He's a very smart football player. And, if he's starting week 1, I think I would be a little concerned. But if he goes in as your backup and has to fill in for several games, again, I think with the right system, with the right guys around him, might be able to just sneak you into the postseason. Well, my next category is guys who are just backup quarterbacks, but can be decent backup quarterbacks. A guy like Baker Mayfield. Look, you guys have seen me on air bash Baker Mayfield. I don't like the dude. I don't think he's a good quarterback. I don't think he's that good. He's a bust. I don't know why the Browns took him first overall. That being said, after seeing him play the last few games last year for the Rams, he did play pretty well, and he was throwing. I didn't even hear of some of these guys he was throwing to. I don't even think Baker knew some of these guys he was throwing to. I mean, he only signed there, when he did. I think he can be a pretty good backer because he started a lot. Almost like, he was a guy who was a 4-year starter in this league. Not a very good one, but he was a 4-year starter in this league. Guy who's always had a chip on his shoulder. He was a walk-on at Oklahoma. He waited his turn, got his shot. And, he had, of course, a very good college career. Always had the character issues. He had the stuff in college, which is what the knock was on him. Those were what the main negatives were. His character, he's always had that certain arrogance to him from, running into the middle of the field and sticking the flag and, on the house 50 when they beat them. And he had the weird, the gesture where he grabbed his private parts on the sideline. On the side time, he had some time where he wouldn't shake guys' hands, and in the NFL he had some things that. He had the one thing where he called out Duke Johnson for not showing up to camp because he was holding out, and some of the veterans were like, "Dude, when it comes to a guy's contract, you don't say that." It kind of ticked them off. There's been a bunch of other things. He seems like he's been a little better the last year or two. I think he can be a pretty good backup. Nothing more. But he can be a pretty good backup because he's if he had to start for a few games, if he has to start, if a guy goes down week 7, week 8, he has to start the rest of the season. If Taylor Heineke or the guys I just named were in there, I would feel okay enough that maybe he could keep my team competitive. If Baker were to start the last 8 games, I would be like, oh no. But if Baker has to start 3 or 4 games where the guy has like a short-term injury, I think you could survive. Come saying how I feel about Carson Wentz. Look, Wentz is another guy, very high pick with second pick, and he, of course, had a little more success than Baker did. First couple years, he was very good. He had the 1 year, if he was healthy in 2017, he would have won that. He would have won the MVP, I think. Even the year afterwards, he was still a very good quarterback. I don't know what happened. The wheels have kind of fallen off. He has had so many injuries. So, but I think he can make a good backup because I do think he's a good dude. Seems like guys like him. I remember after the coach traded him, there were some guys who kind of weren't happy about it because they actually liked him. So I think he's a guy who I do think he's a pretty good leader. He's a well-liked guy in the locker room. Has been a starter for several years. Pretty much every year he's been in the league, he has entered the year to start. He's been benched almost everywhere he's been. But at the end of the day, he is a 6, 7, 8 year starter. So he's got more than enough starting experience. He's well liked in the locker room. If he has to start 3 or 4 games in the right system, the team will survive. To start 8 or 9 games, if the star goes down for the season, you're in trouble. He's not very good. But he can be a decent backup. I think Mike White's in that category too. I think he's definitely in that category. At one point, as Jeff Howe was thinking, whoa, this guy might be our franchise quarterback. Us Jets fans definitely overreact because we just wanted someone that's not Zach Wilson. So we saw a quarterback actually throw a forward pass. We're like, whoa, that's crazy. I don't think he's certainly not a franchise quarterback. I don't even think he's a starting caliber quarterback, but he's definitely a guy that players like. He's always had a chip on his shoulder. He wasn't a huge name, in coming out of high school. In college, his numbers didn't exactly jump off the page. He was, I think, a 5th. No, I think he was undrafted. You saw him last year. When we asked him what they thought, do you think he should have been drafted? He's like, I thought I should have not been number 1 pick. Obviously, he's being a little overconfident there. Obviously, he was not that kind of material. But you see, he's always had that kind of chip on his shoulder. You see, he's another guy that guys he definitely like in the locker room. And again, I would not try. And also, he has trouble staying on the field, kind of like Carson Wentz does. So playing less is probably an advantage. If he had not hurt himself, if he had not broken his ribs against Buffalo, the Jets might have snuck in the playoffs. They might have, because he had to start Zach Wilson for 2 games. So obviously we all know how those games went. He may have won at least one of those. And then if he was healthy if he was healthy against Seattle, they may have won that game. Would have been a hell of a lot closer. And then the season finale was against Miami, against Skylar Thomas. I think with Jets, Joe Flacco didn't know what he was doing that game. If Mike White was healthy and starting that game, I think Jets would have won that game. Would have won that game. And if Mike White hadn't gotten hurt in that Buffalo game, and he wasn't, every time he threw in that game, he felt like I was getting hit by a truck. They may have won that game against Buffalo. They beat him the first time 2 teams played with Zach freaking Wilson. That game was very close. So if he hadn't gotten hurt, just might have been in the playoffs. And who knows? Maybe this one we would have been saying, hold on, maybe we should actually re-sign this guy. Would they even be talking about Aaron Rodgers or Derek Carr going there? But regardless, I don't think he's a starting quarterback, but I do think he's a pretty good backup. Okay, you may have noticed I did not mention Lamar Jackson. You could argue he's probably better than all these dudes. He's my wild card. I have him in a separate category. He's in my separate category. He's my wild card. This is why. When he's healthy and he's at top of his game, he's a top 10 quarterback in the league. I don't think there's a question about that. He's God knows how many games over 500 in the regular season. He's a former MVP for crying out loud. What he can do with his legs, we've seen very few quarterbacks have ever been able to do what he can do with his legs. Outside of Michael Vick and maybe Cam Newton, no one else can do what Lamar Jackson has done with his legs. He may retire as the greatest running quarterback of all time. He probably is at least top 3 right now, and will probably be first if he plays long enough. But there's way too many concerns with this guy. He can't stay healthy. The last 2 years, not been able to stay healthy. Also, runners usually don't last because they take so many extra hits. Look at Cam Newton. 1 minute he was MVP. All of a sudden, he was MVP. Then, he starts learning how to be accurate. All of a sudden, he's looking, whoa, this guy's looking pretty scary. And then the next minute, it's like he couldn't throw the ball for more than 5 yards because his shoulder was so messed up. So, and Lamar's already having injuries. He's only played 5 years in the league. Like, who knows? Could this continue? I mean, you could argue he may have been a little overcautious because he last year he might have thought he was getting extended and then he didn't, so he kind of got screwed. And then this year he almost knows he's getting paid. That being said, now we got all this stuff coming out of the Ravens training staff and how bad it was. And you got some of these guys speaking out saying like their careers were ruined, how badly their injuries were treated. Maybe the Ravens training staff just mishandled his injuries both times, and as a result, he suffered a setback and he wasn't able to come back. You never know. That being said, he's gotten into the last 2 years. We don't know. He's probably getting a 5-year contract. Now, will he even be the same player in 5 years because of how many hits he's already taken and is going to hit? How many hits is going to take? Continue to take? I don't know. And he's not the greatest passer in the world. Great runner. He's not a bad passer, but he doesn't have a great arm. Never really has. Also, he's not big in the playoff. He has 1 playoff win in 5 years, and the 4 playoff games, he's 1-3, and has not played well really in any of them. So he has so many concerns. I think if he were to say he wants $35 or $40 million a year, I think teams would say bet and literally the entire league go after him. But Badu wants $50 million a year. He wants $250 million guaranteed. No one's gonna want to pay him that. And now the Ravens put on the non-exclusive tag, so they have they can match any offer, or they could take back 2 first-round picks, one on walk. So not only if I'm on our team, do I have to give him more money than any quarterback in the league, and he's not, and he's better than a lot of quarterbacks in the league, but you could argue there's probably 7 or 8 guys that are possibly better than him. I could think of at least probably 6 guys that are better than him. So he's being paid as the best quarterback technically when he's obviously not. And I gotta give up 2 first-round picks. I don't know if I want to do that. So he's a big wild card. If you didn't have to give him as much money and give up the draft picks, I think the entire league would be calling him. There might be 20 teams calling. There would be calling Lamar Jackson. But because he wants so much money, you got to give up the draft picks. On top of that, his injury concerns and all that. Can he win the playoffs? Teams are split on what to do. They might rather give Jimmy Garoppolo a short-term deal and, build the roster, adjust the roster to his needs and hope that he stays healthy. And we know when he's healthy, he can get you to the playoffs. Then pay Lamar so much more money. On paper, you could be, come out of your division. You would rather, play it safe with a guy like Jimmy Garoppolo or someone like that. I think a lot of people would lean towards that. So he's a big wild card. Let's talk about some of these guys coming out of the draft. My top 4 quarterbacks. Honestly, I don't love the quarterback class this year. I love CJ Stroud. I think he's going to be a special player. I like Bryce Young. The problem is he's listed at 5'10", 204, so he's very small. I hate judging guys on their size, but there's been small quarterbacks that have worked. Drew Brees is only 6 feet tall, not that big of a guy, and he's one of the greats. There's been smaller guys that have succeeded at the quarterback position, but you see a guy like Tua who was 5'8", 5'8", and he hasn't been able to last. He also had injuries in high school and college as well. Bryce hasn't had that. He hasn't had the injury history that Tua had coming into the NFL. But I just don't know if his body will last. He's a guy, if his body holds up, I think he could be a really special player, Bryce Young. But that's, for me, is a small if. So I do think teams are ranking Bryce Young ahead of CJ Stroud. But personally, I do have Stroud over Bryce Young. Anthony Richardson, obviously, we see the physicals. He's 6'4", 245. And you saw him out the combine. He's up there. He's extremely athletic. You saw him on the broad jump, on the vertical jump. He ran a 4.40. So the guy's very fast, but okay, yes. So yes, he's all right. He's got the athleticism. He's got perfect size for a quarterback. But I can he throw the ball to the receiver? Can he do that? Can he scramble without fumbling? Can the guy legitimately play? Like the guy this year, he threw for 2,400 yards, and he completed 53% of his passes. Those numbers aren't good. Those numbers aren't good. So I don't know. I think maybe he's a project. If he goes to the right situation and he sits for a year or two, he might, and they do it right, he could turn out to be a really special player. But if he's not in a perfect situation and he's and he starts a little bit earlier than he probably should, he could go down as a major bust. So if you're a GM, if I were GM, I would be really split because I could either take him in the top 5 or 10 picks and possibly have a major bust and set my franchise back several years, or I can say, you know what, he's too risky and pass on him, but then now have to play him have him turn out to be a star, and now he's gonna throw for 400 yards and 5 touchdowns for the next 15 years against my team, which I don't want either. Well, when I could have had him. So I'm split on him. I think he's got a lot of potential, but he's got to go to the right situation. Then when Will Levis, I'm not sold on Levis. He's got a really good arm. But Kentucky is not a football school. I get worried when these guys go to like these small schools, like these not so competitive football schools. Not all of them turn out bad. I mean, Josh Allen once went to Wyoming. I don't know I don't know if even the state of Wyoming has 10 people in it, and he played college. There was the only thing that would even take him out of high school, which is a very cool story, by the way. And look how he turned out. That being said, Jordan Love went to Utah State. We thought this guy was like this next prodigy, and yes, he's been stuck behind Aaron Rodgers, so you can't judge him too much. But he hasn't exactly showed up enough in the small time that he's played, where he's going to be a star. If he did, I think Aaron Rodgers would have already been traded. I think part of the reason Green Bay hasn't pulled the trigger, along with Aaron Rodgers doing his whole darkness stuff, and maybe I don't know what he's doing, is they're probably questioning. Although there might be a little more confident now. Is Jordan Love even a starting caliber quarterback in this league? And the biggest comparison I can make to Levis is Zach Wilson. Zach Wilson. We saw you also that throw at his pro day where people got wowed, especially just I'll think Joe Douglas, just the end who drafted him, very regrettably drafted him. They're looking at his numbers. It was like, oh my god, this kid's crazy. Look at his arm, look at his numbers in college. Then you realize he went to BYU. He's playing against Troy and Coastal Carolina. And you make about numbers against those teams. And we'll not play anybody good. Yeah, yes, Kentucky's in the SEC, but they're such a they're not even like that's obviously a basketball school. Like no one pays attention to freaking Kentucky. They ain't playing anybody good. Yes, he had a terrible offensive coordinator. He had one of the worst offensive coordinators in college football. The play calling wasn't that good. He didn't have the best pieces in the world around him. He didn't have, what Bryce Young had at Alabama. No one does. But he's a pretty arm. Every year, there's one guy who has a pretty arm and people jump. He was, 2 years ago, it was Zach Wilson. This year, it was Malik Willis. I'm not going to give up on Yanks. He's only played like 4 games, but from what I saw, yikes. Every year in every draft, there's a guy. A guy like Christian Hackenberg, had this big arm, just took him in the second round. They gave him a shot in preseason, and I remember when they put him in preseason, I was excited, like, this guy might be our future. And then I watched him play. I was like, okay, outside of the 2 throws that he was just basically just like flexing that he has good arm strength, I realized, good God, this guy couldn't even complete a pass against the New York Giants, who were terrible at the time, 4th string players. This guy can't play. Guy was a backup like the AIF for one of these stupid ass leagues. So I am not sold on Will Levis at all. People have him going in the top 5. Mel Kiper, who I love, best draft analyst out there, has him as his number 1 quarterback. I don't know what he's thinking. I don't understand. But I do have him at the number 4 quarterback on the list because he has the arm talent. Does have a pretty arm, I guess. Now, before I close out, this has been fun. I might do these more often. These kind of like, not a full podcast. This went a little longer than I thought, but like it's like a short little thing, just like focus on one specific thing. So let's predict where everyone's going. Of every single guy I just named you. Aaron Rodgers. I think he ends up on the Jets. I don't want to be biased because I am a Jet fan. You guys all know that. But I think he ends up on the Jets. This is a complicated matter, no doubt. Anything involving Aaron Rodgers is complicated. I don't even want someone to ask him what he's doing because we all know the answer that he's gonna give us is not gonna answer the question. But anyway, I think he ends up on the Jets. I think these are his options. The Raiders already said a while back they don't plan to pursue him. That could change, of course. As of right now, it does not look like they plan to pursue him. There's no other team that appears to be in on him that needs a quarterback. It looks like his options right now are limited. He either goes to play for the Jets, goes back to Green Bay for another year, or he retires. You never know with Rodgers. Maybe he doesn't want to retire, but he wants to play. He either plays in Green Bay again, which I don't know if he wants to do. And in fact, the Packers seem like they might want to move him. Which I think everyone's like, oh, every year it's the same thing. Remember, the last 2 years, I think Rodgers wants to leave, especially the 2 years ago. He definitely wanted to leave, but the Packers were like, we're not trading. He's like, fine, I'll come back, basically. I think Rodgers wanted to leave, but the Packers didn't want to trade him, and he realized, all right, I'm not getting traded. I guess I'll go back for another year. This year, it appears the Packers are willing to, wouldn't mind trading him and giving Jordan Love a shot. So, I think that's a big difference this year. And he just doesn't have any options. You got to work out. He's got almost around $60 million guaranteed this year. That's not going to fly. Whether Green Bay eats money in a trade or Rodgers restructures his deal, which I'm not really sure if he's going to want to do. We all know how Aaron Rodgers is. So there's that. Also, what do the Packers want back? If they want a first round pick and more, do we just want, if the Jets are going to be like, we're still a really young team, Aaron Rodgers is not going to be with us for more than a year or two. We still have other needs, whether it be the offensive line and some other things. Should we give up a first round pick for a guy who we're almost definitely not winning a Super Bowl with and will not be on the team for more than probably 2 years? If they ask for like a young player, do we give up on Elijah Moore yet? Have we, do we? I don't know if they would want. Do they try to see if they can revive the career of Mekhi Becton? If I'm sure Doug, I'm saying please take him, but I'm not sure Doug. Like, offensive tackles, right tackle is a glaring hole on our roster. I wouldn't mind him there. Take at least maybe for depth purposes. He might not want to do that. I don't know, but I do think he ends up on Jets. The Jets need to get him. You pass on Derek Carr. Derek Carr wants to go to the Jets, and you pass down that you need to get Rodgers. Even if you sign Jimmy Garoppolo, you might win 9. You might go 9-8, maybe 10-7, and get to the playoffs. That's as far as you go. I would love if that would be a great year. But Rodgers, you can definitely go 10-7. And people forget the Bills are going to lose some pieces. They're in a tough spot, the Bills. The Jets' chance of winning the division are a lot higher than people think if they get Aaron Rodgers. Jets had some nice pieces. Remember you got Breece Hall coming back. They got some nice pieces on that offense. So I think of him, you go 10-7, and you can possibly win. And I think you might even win a playoff game. Probably only long because Rodgers isn't that great in the playoffs. But still, I think just they got to get him. And I do think they will. I hope they do, as a fan. Kirk Cousins, who I think stays in Minnesota. I already mentioned that. I don't think they move him. Jimmy Garoppolo. I think he goes to the Raiders. If I'm Josh McDaniels, I'm thinking I need to take a step forward or I'm not going to have a job in a year. So I don't think he would want to re-sign Jarrett Stidham and give him a chance, although he did play a lot better than we thought the last 2 games of last season. Do you move up and take Anthony Richardson and then start him when he probably isn't ready and just he'll let him learn thing? That being said, you're gonna the 6-11 mark is probably your ceiling. And if you do that again, you might get fired. I don't know why. The guy shouldn't have a job, but he does. So yes, he shouldn't have a job, but for some reason he does. So. Him, I want to get the best guy I can at that quarterback position. I'm telling Dave Ziegler, please get me a little more help. Please prove that defense. The defense is an abomination, and just hope that it's enough to get him to the postseason, because that might be the only thing that saves his job. If he does that, what he did last year again, I really don't know how you bring him back. I was saying I would have fired him by like week 10 of last year. All right, Ryan Tannehill, I think goes back to the Titans. I mean, the GM said he's going to be a Titan. Things can change quickly in the NFL, but I think he comes back. I mean, he didn't draft Malik Willis. Willis didn't exactly inspire a ton of confidence. I think he's 6 with Tannehill 1 more year. Well, Taylor Heineke, I think he re-signed with the Commanders. Ron Rivera likes him. I think they move forward with Sam Howell. I don't think Heineke's enough to start week 1. I think they either move forward with Sam Howell, they either draft somebody else, or maybe they go and grab somebody else. Those are the 3 options. You either Sam Howell, someone in the draft, or somebody else in free agency, not Taylor Heineke. But I think he resigns on like a similar deal. His last deal, I think, was like 2 years for like 2 years for $11 million, something like that. I think he sends a similar deal like that, and then he goes back to the Commanders as a backup, and because he's said in the past that he's kind of looking for whatever role that they give him. If that's the role they give him as a backup, just be ready to step in if someone gets hurt. That's the one he'll take. Talk about Gardner Minshew. I have him going to Indianapolis Colts. The Colts, I think, are they're going to draft a quarterback. That's pretty set in stone. Jim Irsay is tired of these over the hill, average, middle of the road veterans. They want a young guy in there, but they could also use a veteran to help them learn. If they don't get Bryce Young, CJ Stroud, I don't think there's anybody else that's in this quarterback class that's going to start is ready to start week 1. So Minshew can either be a nice mentor and will be a nice mentor to whoever they draft. If the guy were to get hurt or struggle, he could step in. Or if they end up with Will Levis or Anthony Richardson. Said they can't well pick up the first pick or something. Or someone beats him to it. He could start for a few games if need be. Jacoby Brissett's the next guy. I have him going to the Houston Texans. DeMeco Ryan, the new head coach, they plan to add a quarterback in the draft and free agency, so they got that second pick, so they're going to end up with younger Stroud. And I think Brissett's a nice guy who could help mentor whichever guy they get. And again, if they were to get hurt, he could step in. Now let's do our backups. Carson Wentz, I have him going to the Falcons. I don't know what they're gonna do. I think they'll grab somebody. I'm not sure how much confidence does Ritter inspire, but I think you have Wentz as your backup. I think Baker Mayfield goes back to the Rams. Stafford's only getting older. The shoulder problem. I think he played well enough. You never know. Maybe he catches lightning in the bottle. I think he goes back to the Rams. Lamar Jackson, the big wild card. I think he goes to the Carolina Panthers. I don't think he goes back to Baltimore. I mean, the Ravens, the tag they put on was basically like, okay, if someone makes him an offer that is like not that good of an offer, we'll slip right in and get him for cheaper than what we thought. Or if they make him a crazy offer that we want to pay, we'll let him go and we'll take back 2 first-round picks. I don't think Lamar is going to accept an offer below what we all know that he wants. So I don't think he goes to the Ravens. I don't think Atlanta. A lot of people say he was going to Atlanta. Atlanta said they're not interested in him. I don't think that's a great fit either. They don't have enough talent over there. A lot of these teams are saying they're out on them. Carolina, I do believe, was one of them. I think only some of these teams might be saying they're out because they don't want to jack up his price. If there's, if it's either you take a lower, if you settle on a deal with the Ravens or nothing, all right, that could lower his price. But if 5-6 teams want him, now he might jack up that price. So I think that might be part of it. Part of it is also the concerns that everyone has about him, of course, like I mentioned earlier. But I think he can go to Carolina. They're desperate for a quarterback. They have the 9th pick. They could draft somebody. But they're not, almost like try to get the first pick and move 8 spots from the 1 pick. They're going to have to go up a lot to Chicago. So they might as well just throw a bunch of money at Lamar, give up the 2 future firsts. That's probably less than what you're going to have to give up to trade out to the number 1 pick to take a guy who we don't even know is going to pan out technically. So I think Lamar, I think he goes to Carolina. As for the top four rookies I mentioned, I think Bryson goes to the Colts. I think the Colts trade up and get the first pick from the Bears. And Bryce Young, I think they draft Bryce Young. They want a young guy and they can get him. I think Stroud goes to the Texans. If I'm Texans, I'm staying at 2. There's no reason to trade up to number 1. Unless you really, really want younger Stroud, unless you really prefer one over the other. I think those 2 are very, very close as to who's number 1, who's number 2. They should be able to build their team around either. Either Stroud is a better fit there, honestly. So I think they end up with the Texans. I think the Falcons, who currently have the 8th pick, I think they end up with Anthony Richardson. I can see them maybe moving up where it's at 3 with Arizona, maybe even number 5 with Seattle, and getting him. I think they get Anthony Richardson. This is an interesting one. I think Will Levis goes to the Titans. I think after Anthony Richardson's combine, I think he slipped ahead of Will Levis as the 3rd best quarterback in this class. Will Levis is now, I think, the 4th best quarterback in this class. So as a result, he might not go in the top 5 more. He might be more of a top 10 guy. The Titans, I think, have like the 11th or the 12th pick. I think that could be a spot. I mean, Ron Carford didn't draft Malik Willis. He inspired a ton of confidence. I say he drafts Levis and he sits behind Tannehill for a year and they try him out next year. All right, that is my little spiel on all the available quarterbacks this offseason. Thank you all for listening. I don't think I'll do anything else while I'm home, but I will be back with my formal podcast Monday. Till next time, so long. Have a great day.